Well, compared to my last two Doremi reviews, at least the age gap here isn't quite as dramatic. We open with Michelle back and once again showing off his awful sense of quote-unquote beauty. Yeah, at this point I think his boss was just waiting for his contract to be up. And his rejection of Michelle's latest work attracted the him particles, seemingly hinting at the return of the great Michelle, but just hold that thought. As the next day, the girls found the Utonium lab in disarray and the props missing. On top of that, a pair of crab heads greeted them. Pretty nice when they give me a reference that's easy to point out. This is especially easy for me, as him Diddle Riddle is one of my favorite episodes of the OG. There, him also made vague threats towards doing something awful to the professor unless the girls completed a set of 9 challenges in a limited amount of time. It involved some pretty clever riddles and unique challenges where they did stuff like defeat a monster without their superpowers, or tried to get to a phone without flying, and yeah, this is the episode I hinted at back in the episode 39 review. It also had a couple of jokes that still get a really good laugh out of me to this day. One being where Bubbles matched the ace in SAT that Blossom flunked at, which will be relevant here, and the ending, which I won't spoil just yet. Anyway, since this was another half-episode story, unlike the OG that took up a full episode, the challenges were reduced down to just a scavenger hunt for 3 items, though at least there was a clever reason behind it, as we'll soon see. The first item was a diamond from the North Pole, and while they didn't find Santa there, they did find a kingdom of sea otters, because why not? I saw that 2-part of South Park. I know exactly what they want. But yeah, like the OG episode, the Bubbles of this team became the MVP, as Miyako also had her OG counterpart's ability to talk to animals. In this case, the Otter King challenged them to a shell-breaking contest for the diamond. Kaoru accepted the challenge, and of course due to their inherent advantages,
they go around chopping down trees for tables when they have perfectly good tummies to eat on.
It seemed like the king was going to win. Fortunately, while breaking a single shell directly was hard due to their small size, a single widespread vibration did the trick for all of them at once. With that, they got the so-called diamond, which turned out to just be some blue ice, which is an actual phenomenon that occurs when snow compresses atop a glacier. And as it just so happened, there was a monitor there for him to tell them that their next item were pearls from the moon. The moon! On the moon, they found a whole civilization of rabbits making mochi. And before anyone tries to tie this back to frickin' Dragon Ball of all things, let me explain. That episode, and in turn this one, was based off of the belief that the face of the moon looks like a rabbit making mochi to the Japanese. It's just one of the many interpretations of what the shadows of the moon can look like to different cultures who can see it from different angles, mostly depending on what side of the hemisphere you live on. This is why that one episode of Dragon Ball ended with Goku forcing the villains of the week to recreate the myth. Fun fact, apparently those guys survived the moon, getting blown up multiple times throughout the series, on top of being able to survive in the vacuum of space, which is established to be a thing in the Dragon Ball universe. Yeah, that franchise is kind of stupid when you really think about it, isn't it? Still on that note, the next challenge was a race where the challenger would be handicapped by being forced to wear a heavy turtle shell in reference to the tortoise and the hare. Thus, they almost went with the powerhouse Kaoru again, but... Hey, at least this Pinkley is being honest about her gluttony. But yeah, for this version of that OG episode, each of the 3 challenges were going to be done by each of the girls in a kind of clever way of showing off the ingenuity and talents of each. It resulted in them being able to show off their unique strengths, like Momoko showing off her genre savviness, knowing how the tortoise and the hare race should turn out, but the problem was that this rabbit was surprisingly punctual. Fortunately, she also seemed to be a bit of a Gamera fan. With that, the pearls turned out to actually be dumplings that the rabbits ate in their version of a moon viewing, or rather in this case, earth viewing festival. Thus, there was only one more challenge and girl left, with Miyako trying to get some underground coral. This led to the classic gag of us only being able to see the Girlz and somethings No, not that something, Jesus. I mean, he said he was a Minotaur, so let's just assume he's a really grumpy Asterios or something. On that note, Miyako dueled him in a very old-school JRPG sort of way. Legit, this fight is better than anything we've gotten out of Precure in recent years. And while I probably should use some Final Fantasy music here, I prefer going with another classic. With that, they received their final item and handed it all over to him. Thus, they expected to get the profs back, but again, if you watch the original episode, then you know what the twist is going to be. Yep, as it turned out, the profs were never in any real danger, and in fact had just rushed out of the lab that morning to act as hair models for a non-great Michelle. And while this wasn't quite as funny as him having a bet with the prof over a free meal, I do have to give credit to this version of the character for never actually saying that he was doing anything to the profs, and only just implying it in order to get ingredients for his little moon viewing party. Man, you know what? That was a fun little tale, so honestly, I don't know how the second half is going to be able to top that. I mean, who did they get to write it? Oh... The second half of the episode opened with Momoko gazing at her friends with envy as both had gotten love letters, which was made even worse when Himiko rubbed the fact in her face. Now, I have heard that this story might also be based off of an episode from the OG, A Very Special Blossom. In that one, the girls tried to get an expensive golf club set for the professor on Father's Day, and when they couldn't afford it, Blossom just looted it in the aftermath of an attack by Mojo. Thus, when confronted over where she got them from, she told an obvious lie that eventually snowballed into a fight with her own sisters. This story will mostly follow that last part, though just on a slightly larger scale. Anyway, Himiko rightfully wasn't buying any of Momoko's claims, leading to the pink Powerpuff to outright say she had a boyfriend. Trying to call her out on her fib, she let her borrow her phone to call this alleged BF. This led to them calling the Utonium labs more than once, which ended up bringing out both Ken and the prof. As I keep saying, dude, you ain't their dad in this universe, hence why you ain't getting golf clubs. To make things even more complicated, Kaoru and Miyako ended up joining in as Himiko kept redialing the lab. Momoko, are you dating Gudako? Because no, just no. Eventually, Momoko seemingly managed to lie her way out of her predicament by saying that he was sick, but that just encouraged Himiko to pay him a visit by any means necessary. Thus, it really would have been a good idea to just tell the truth here, but... Rightfully, everyone was ready to call her out on her BS, but like Pinocchio, no, not that abomination, she just kept letting her lies grow out of control, though, you know, as long as nothing resembling her grandiose tales actually appeared, then they couldn't disprove her or anything, and...
Well, there's something you don't see every day.
Okay, I might have my issues with him sometimes, but when Murayama is on top of his comedy game, he is amazing. And things only continued to snowball out of control, as not only did all of her friends believe in her Romeo and Juliet story, so did the entire city, including their rogues gallery, and eventually the whole world. Oh my god! Don't get political, don't get political. And on top of everything else, when the aliens started to feel threatened, they called in backup. Oh my god, this episode is amazing. With frankly absolutely no other recourse, Momoko finally decided to fess up, and to her credit, did kind of own up to her lies, and even tried to spin it into a good thing by pointing out how her little lie managed to bring everyone in the world, human and monster alike, together.
This is bullshit! Get the bricks!
With that, Momoko had very effectively become the enemy of not just the entire planet, but also at least of the Milky Way galaxy. With that, the episode ended with her having escaped to a little asteroid and one of the most appropriate subtitles ever. I honestly don't have much to say about this episode, other than that second half was fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong, the first half was a fun little throwback to one of my favorite episodes of the OG with its own unique touches, but holy crap, the second half was one of the most epic comedies I've ever seen outside of Gainax or Studio Trigger. It just goes to show how a lighthearted, low-budget series like this can be made so much better when they have amazing writers behind it. While certainly fine on its own, I don't think there was any real way the first half of this episode was gonna top the OG's take on the wildest of goose chases with a shorter runtime. Still, as always, I appreciate that this Japanese anime just did their own thing and managed to incorporate their own unique touches like their own mythology and even pop culture. It even added some nice bits of characterization for each of the girls, showing off their unique talents, making for a fun little adventure. However, of course, the real main event was that second half, which was by far one of the best takes of a liar revealed story I've ever seen. While I have had my issues with him, I really do think Isamu Murayama can be a great writer when he's given the freedom to be one, as this was an excellent example of such. For the sake of time, I couldn't go over all of it, but for what's ultimately a build up to a big gag punchline, this story was really well paced and laid out its chain of events very logically. Thus, for as absurd as it got by the end, it was easy to follow and did get you engrossed by the end, making the payoff all the more enjoyable. As a result, it not only earned that PSA by the end, showing how a low lie can grow out of control, granted in a very exaggerated manner here, but it also acted as a good character piece for Momoko. For as much as Toei tries to push their pink leads as faultless pillars these days, it's just more fun to see an actually heavily flawed lead like this. Sure, while Momoko was absolutely in the wrong for not just owning up to her lies sooner, we also understood why she got herself into that predicament, and at least feel a little bad for her at the end, as she even did try to turn it into a good thing. Obviously, for an episodic series, this isn't actually going to carry over to the next episode, but at least it managed to highlight both the best and worst of this character at the same time. And overall, this is just an absolutely fun little episode with a couple of tales about liars and how we should avoid meeting and definitely becoming one at all costs. Man, honestly, it is going to be a pain when we will have to wrap up this series review, but at least it is going to lead into a fun little overview when we get there. For it, we'll try to cover what truly made this show unique amongst the other Toei magical girl anime, and how it managed to withstand the test of time. So look forward to it. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go see if tea made from blue ice really is all that good.